Now, on the afternoon of January 6th, 2025, I was conducting my 1,991st daily trash pickup at Eaton Canyon. I was partway through that cleanup, sitting at the first crossing, when I sat down on a rock, looked at the trees, looked at the birds, looked at the mountains, and wondered to myself if this was the last time I'd ever get to experience the serenity of this park. You see, I work as a hyper-local meteorologist, and on that day, I was forecasting a major Santa Ana windstorm to strike the community. Now, a windstorm in and of itself wouldn't destroy the park, but the fuel loads that I was witnessing as I was sitting on that rock looking all around me were incredible. And I knew if a fire were to break out, 1,000 homes could burn. And that's the report that I issued to my clients immediately before that hike. The next day, I conducted my 1,992nd daily trash pickup at Eaton Canyon. It wasn't serene because there were major winds roaring out of the canyon. I could hear trees breaking in the distance. I was getting sand blasted every few minutes. It was an incredible sight to see, but I once again thought to myself, this could very well be it. 45 minutes after I finished that hike, the Eaton fire started. And 60 minutes after that, my park was gone. The whole thing. Now, Santa Ana windstorms are some of the most ferocious and angry weather events on planet Earth. And we have all experienced them in this room. Their power to drive fear and wildfire into our communities is unmatched worldwide. Now, what you are looking at is a map. It's a tool that meteorologists use, a parameter called the 500 millibar relative vorticity. Now, 500 millibars means we're looking at halfway up in the atmosphere, where half the atmosphere is above you and half the atmosphere is below you. And this measure of vorticity tells meteorologists how much mixture there is in the atmosphere. Now, during Santa Ana windstorms, you'll see a highlighted color over Southern California, where a powerful storm is able to drive its strong jet stream winds that you experience at plane altitudes all the way down to the surface. And this particular wind event was not only extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily able to bring its winds to the surface, it was also long-lasting. Most of the time, you get a single U-shaped curve. But this one was more in the shape of one side was a lot longer and allowed those winds to continue for a much longer period. It's part of why I knew the conditions to start a wildfire would be so bad, because the windstorm is going to be so long. Now, these tools are very complicated, and us as meteorologists have to find a way to communicate these kinds of parameters to you, the general public, to understand. Now, the problem with Santa Ana windstorms is that we don't have a scale of any kind to measure them. You've all heard of a Category 5 hurricane or a magnitude 7 earthquake. Those are tools for the general public to understand the scale of a disaster. But they don't exist for windstorms at all. This is the Eaton Canyon Nature Center. This is a place I spent 2 years pouring my heart and soul into at work, and I'm devastated to see it like this. And none of the work I do, none of the meteorology work I do matters if you, the general public, don't understand it. We need a windstorm scale, and we don't have one. So let's create one. And let's create one now. I'm not going to wait for anyone to create one. So I realized that the National Weather Service was, for understandable reasons, not able to help Altadena forecast major wind events. As recently as January 2022, we were struck by a large windstorm that the National Weather Service wasn't able to see, simply because they're a very small office and they've got 22 million people to forecast for. But if we're able to deploy a windstorm, we can help communicate to you guys how powerful this event may be. And this is what I created. First off, I wanted to start with a windstorm scale that recognizes the power of some of these events. At the very end there, you see a Class 5 wind event in which 80-mile-an-hour winds would be seen in the suburbs. I don't want that to happen very often. I want them to be as rare as a landfalling Category 5 hurricane. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, how strong was the January 2025 windstorm, the one that burned down 11,000 homes in our communities and killed 30 people? Surely it was a 5, right? No, it wasn't a 5. It's pretty strong. Surely it was a 4, right? It should be a 4. Barely. And that's the power of a windstorm scale. It allows us to communicate those kinds of things. Now, words are very important, and I made a mistake this week. This past Wednesday and Tuesday, I made a forecast about how an extreme heat wave may hit later this month in June. And in that time, forecast models had backed off a little bit, and it's not going to be as warm. And I kind of slightly burned my reputation there, and I feel bad about it. But it's okay. People have short memory, so they won't remember. But those adjectives that I'm using are critical. And when you tune into the local news station and they say things like strong Santa Ana winds are on approach, what does that even mean? Strong can mean anything. It can be strong like, oh, it brings a small branch down, or strong, it burns the entire community up. And we need these set windstorm scales in order to better communicate that. So I've tested these scales. Every time we get a major windstorm, I'll drive all throughout Altadena. I'll look for windstorm damage. And there's specific on-the-ground damage that I'm searching for. Let's start with a Class 2 windstorm. That's the golden coloring right here. In order for me to consider something to be a Class 2 windstorm, I need about 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. You might remember those windstorms for a few weeks and then forget about them. But I want to see some power outages. If I can go around, collect all this data, look for those power outages, and put that in a database, we can create all sorts of records and maps and graphs to communicate to fire battalion chiefs, community managers, city managers, state officials on how they can best prepare for each event. So I can go in and I can create graphs like this. This is a look at the seasonal variability in Santa Ana wind event frequency in the community of Altadena. And this graph only exists because I have made a scale to use it. You can see that the peak of windstorms happen in January, February. That's when most events happen. But there's another little peak in October and November. Now, that's an interesting peak because you normally wouldn't expect something like that to actually have peaks. There should be a single one. This is when the season peaks, and that's it. There shouldn't be a second one. But when we look at some of the other lines there, I'm going to go forward here, they disappear. That line shows the frequency of the major Santa Ana wind events. And you notice that second peak in October and November is completely missing. And the reason why is because warm flavor Santa Ana wind events, which don't impact Altadena, are sometimes sneaking their way in October and November. And that's when the Kinaloa fire in 1993 happened, and 100 homes burned down. So using this information, I can go up to city officials and say, if it's October and November and a wind event breaks out, it's probably not going to be very strong. You're probably going to get about 100 homes destroyed. And that's what you should be planning for. But if we drift into January and February with no rainfall whatsoever, and one of these major wind events happen, that's when you should worry. And these are the kinds of tools that simply did not exist and weren't available to the people who make decisions. This is another chart I made, and this one was a bit shocking to me. I actually, in my time driving around Altadena after or during windstorms, I'd noticed particular neighborhoods were more or less vulnerable to wind events. I'd go past a traffic light, and suddenly the winds would blow up, and the trees would be moving sideways. I'd make a U-turn, go past that light again, and they'd die down on the other side. And every single windstorm, this block was getting hit, and that block wasn't. So I made this graph in about April 2024, and then the Eaton fire started. And I knew there was a difference between the type of wind that blew through Altadena and the type of wind that blew through Eaton Canyon. Now, I want you to take a look at where the difference is, where the boundary is between Eaton Canyon's wind tunnel, which is that red area, and Altadena's wind tunnel, which is that turquoise area. Let's zoom in on that and overlay it with a burn map of homes. There we are. It fell right on my line that I made a year in advance, because the type of wind event that impacts Eaton Canyon was different. It was gustier. A lot of the embers were getting caught inside of the ravine that separates the mountains from the neighborhood and didn't allow the fire to spread into the community. But once you get past Eaton Canyon into Altadena, where you experience a different type of wind event, those embers can flow right into town and destroy any home in its path. And those lines, I guess I was off by half a block, but I think that's pretty good. Goodness. But think about what we can do in all these other communities that also have these tiny little wind tunnels. So if fire breaks out in La Crescenta, I can call up the battalion chief and say, don't let that fire get into Big Tujunga Canyon. There's a wind tunnel in there, and you're going to lose all the homes below. But if you let it stay in Duke-Majan Canyon, you're good to go. You can protect those homes. That's the power of a simple windstorm scale. So I have a bit of a life update for you guys. And I'm truly honored to announce that the County of Los Angeles recognized the need for something like this. And they brought me in about 6 weeks ago, and they hired me as the first ever County of Los Angeles meteorologist. So, thank you. I am going to be spending this summer, among doing a lot of other tasks, working to deploy this on a national scale, so that nobody in Lahaina, nobody in Paradise, nobody in any other community that's vulnerable to wildfires can go without a windstorm scale ever again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.